Church of Final Retribution. Perpetual pain in the ass for Task Force Beowulf, along with all of our associated law enforcement, paramilitary, and military partners. Supposedly hundreds of years old, but there's no evidence to back up that claim. Modern incarnation of the cult dates back to the turn of the 19th century. Originally a spiritualist cult founded on New Age ideals. The founder and her inner circle were friends with many of the bigger names in theosophy and spiritualism, chiefly Helena Blavatsky and Aleister Crowley, decades after Blavatsky had passed on. The founder and her inner circle were friends with many of the bigger names in theosophy and spiritualism, chiefly Helena Blavatsky and Aleister Crowley, decades after Blavatsky had passed on. Unlike her contemporaries, Maya Gurnsworth was able to go above and beyond what they were doing, diving deeper and deeper into regions of the occult that not even Crowley would ever entertain. She shared this passion with her cohorts, who all came from similar walks of life: disillusioned socialites, debutantes, communists, revolutionaries, anarchists, ingenues, and intellectuals who were dissatisfied and disappointed with the societies in which they were living. They sought to subvert and overthrow the existing system and replace it with a more enlightened and egalitarian society that they had spent close to 3 decades perfecting. Tipping point that led Gurnsworth and her followers pushing forward with their plans for greater social revolution. A tipping point that led to Gurnsworth and her followers pushing forward with their plans for greater social revolution came on New Year's Eve of 1959. In a secluded cave in Petra, Jordan, Gurnsworth and her inner circle underwent a modified version of the Tibetan Thogol ritual. After ingesting a mixture of ayahuasca, magic mushroom, and various other hallucinogenic substances with fermented horse milk and honey. This modern-day soma, combined with the sensory isolation of the cave and the presence of infrasound projectors that they'd set up in the cave prior to sealing it off for the duration of the ritual, was the key to unlocking the hidden visions that they were after to empower them to commit to their revolution. We're still not entirely sure what happened, but according to the journals that Maya herself kept before and after, they had collectively encountered a bizarre entity who apparently lived in the cave. There's plenty of debate over what it is exactly that they encountered. The 2 prevailing hypotheses are very much different from one another. The first being that they encountered a previously mysterious terrestrial life form that was prevalent in folklore. A real-life biological organism that came from the strata of deep history that's baked into the hills, valleys, and mountains of Jordan. There's plenty of debate over what it is exactly that they encountered. The 2 prevailing hypotheses are very much different from one another, with the first being that they encountered a previously mysterious terrestrial life form that was prevalent in folklore, a real-life biological organism that came from the strata of deep history that's baked into the hills, valleys, and mountains of Jordan. The other hypothesis is admittedly more cult-oriented, but considering who it is we're dealing with, it's a bit more thematically appropriate. This hypothesis states that they encountered a creature that was the offspring of an angel and a jinn. For those who don't know what either are, or have any misgivings about them, angels and jinn are both creatures of celestial origin. One's made out of light and divine essences, and the other made out of smokeless fire. As far as we can tell, there's no precedence for this in the mythologies of indigenous peoples of Jordan. But then again, this information could have been lost over the centuries of Muslim expansion and occupation, along with the slaughter of indigenous tribes for choosing not to convert over to Islam. At any rate, according to Gernsworth, they made contact with a faceless angel made out of viscera, shadows, smokeless fire, and pale moonlight, who spoke in a voice that sounded like thunder riddled with multitudes of screaming lesser voices interlaced with its speech. Whatever they encountered, the entity proceeded to strip their souls out of their bodies, severing their connections to the world and taking them above and beyond the reality in which we dwell to an etic reality that resides outside of our own. Etic reality is a reality that we can't experience or describe, a reality that we don't have the sensory and neurological equipment for. This entity supposedly took them to a vast region of space-time that they called the Yasad, the collective unconscious. The entity proceeded to baptize them in the roaring, hungry oceans of the Yasad and exposed them to truths, sensations, and experiences that have been hidden to the vast majorities of the world, save a few souls. Those who can't handle what they experience are often driven mad or destroyed by it. By some miracle, Gernsworth and her colleagues weren't broken by the process, or at least that's what they believed. They came back anointed, sanctified by what they'd undergone, and upon exiting the cave and finishing the ritual, they ventured out into the world to start and stoke the fires of revolution that would ultimately change everything. Since the 1960s, the Church of Final Retribution has been working behind the scenes, gathering their resources, building their armies, manipulating tensions underneath the surface, and playing all sides against one another. Since the 1960s, the Church of Final Retribution has been working behind the scenes, gathering their resources, building their armies, manipulating tensions underneath the surface, and playing sides against one another. They wish to change the world in a drastic way. We've seen their handiwork. People like David Koresh, Jim Jones, the Om Shinrikyo. We've seen their handiwork. People like David Koresh, Jim Jones, the Om Shinrikyo, and others like them are but cheap imitations of what the Church of Final Retribution is striving for. Scorched earth is the primary method of dealing with their adversaries that the Church of Final Retribution chooses to employ. I've been to many sites where they've wiped out the opposition so thoroughly it took us months of combing through the devastation to find scraps of DNA that we could use to identify the dead. And in instances where they didn't start off with scorched earth tactics, they've done things to their opposition that would make the most hardened and jaded forensic analysts and technicians react violently to what they see. I know for a fact that at least 4 of the techs who report to me directly have had to undergo intensive psychological therapy and intervention due to what they've witnessed and the extreme PTSD that came with it. For 6 decades, these sick bastards have been fomenting terror under the pretext of great social change and justice. They've been playing both sides of the spectrum and every single nook and cranny in between. They've been doing this for 60 years, causing strife and discord. They've been encouraging mob action like it's going out of style. No one is safe from their exploitation. We've literally had to shit can over 1,000 personnel, many of them seasoned vets, who were brought out by these goons. Members of the final retribution got to not only their family members, but friends in the community and beyond, digging their tendrils in and contaminating them. And what's worse is we can't find them. They're entirely stateless. Their members carry no form of identification on them, and outside of coerced DNA retrieval, we have no ways of knowing who they are. No fingerprints. They wear contacts to distort retinal tagging and matching. We tried tracking them down to safe houses only to find nothing. These people are ghosts, untraceable, undetectable. They could literally teach each and every federal asset how to be peerless gray elements. They're currently at odds with an organization of embedded anti-fascist terrorists known as Sepulchre, who, according to recent intel, were created specifically to combat fascism by any means necessary, including hijacking and turning national and local infrastructure assets against fascists. We're slowly but surely inching our way to an all-out sectarian war on a level that hasn't been seen in ages. Things go pear-shaped. We're looking at World War III. It'd be worse than anything we could ever begin to imagine. And yes, I know it's unbelievably absurd and cliche to think that these stupid idiots could actually set off World War III. But from all the shit they've done in the preceding decades, it's not a stretch to say that they would absolutely do so. It's easy to think that they hold the cure to all of our societal ills and problems. Many doomsday cults and subcultures believe that they have the solution to fix everything, but in the end, who's going to benefit from any of it when we're all dead and they're the only ones who manage to survive? Is that the world we want? One that we don't get to participate in? Yeah, it does feel that way sometimes, that nothing we do matters in the grand scheme of things. But on a personal, human level, what we do does make a difference. I've seen it and experienced it many times. Hell, I've been given more chances at redemption and fixing things than I feel like I deserve. These bastards, they want to strip all that away from everyone that isn't one of their converts, and even then it'll only be paradise for those who are in the upper echelons. They've already made it clear with their declarations that 90% of their converts will be paving the road to paradise and building its foundations with their blood and their lives, while the remaining 1% rules over their less enlightened peers. And for many people, that's an acceptable goal because it means they won't be suffering under the regimes of their former oppressors. To me, the fact that their converts are willing to commit atrocities to achieve this goal terrifies on a level that is primal and visceral. This is why Task Force Beowulf must win. Anything less than our victory will be hell on earth. I'm not saying that lightly. This is Deputy Director Carla Stone signing off. This is Deputy Director Carla Stone signing off.